Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. This is my first YouTube video and I'm drawing my cousin's D&D character, Zamari. So Zamari is a steampunk, Tabaxi, artificer, rogue. Yes, I remembered all of it. And they're also quite androgynous and they use they, them pronouns. So first I'm doing my line art. I actually do a sketch on paper first, and then I take a photo of that and put it into Medibang Paint and trace over that. But I didn't show that process just because I wasn't really sure how I would record myself sketching. And yeah, I just wanted to show the screen recording. And the reason I do that is just because I'm so much more comfortable sketching on paper with pencil than sketching digitally. I think because that's how I learned to draw, and something about how you can zoom in on your laptop like digitally, it just messes with my head in terms of proportion and size and figuring out what goes where and figuring out how to draw someone. So yeah, I'm much more comfortable with paper, so that's usually what I do. And usually I make sure that I'm completely happy with it on paper. So all the details, the pose, everything, I make sure I'm happy with it on paper before I transfer it digitally. And usually that works pretty well for me, but you probably know there's always some artworks that are just a challenge from start to end. Some artworks happen so smoothly, so naturally, you have a vision in your head, you know exactly what you want and you know exactly how to get there. And I have had artworks like that before. This was not one of them. I thought I was happy with my paper sketch, but when I transferred it digitally, I just found so many things were off. I felt like the face looked wrong, the eyes looked weird, they didn't look like how I wanted it to look. And the sketch originally had like a full head of hair, and then I looked at it and I was like, I don't think a cat would have a full head of hair. And originally the glasses or the goggles were also like, Zamari was actually wearing the goggles so you couldn't see their eyes. But I just found that so impersonal and I felt like you just couldn't see the character at all. And the goggles and the moustache and all those things were in the brief that my cousin gave me. So I knew that I wanted to include them, but I just had to kind of figure out how I wanted to include them. And I found that including the goggles on Zamari's head instead of them actually wearing it was much better. So yeah, there was a lot of troubleshooting, things like that, but I think I managed to get it to a place where I'm relatively happy with it. Of course, there are still little things that I'm not happy with, but I don't think any artwork can be 100% perfect, and I know that we always tend to be the most critical about our own artwork. So I'm happy with it overall, and mostly I'm just happy that I didn't give up on it and I actually completed it. Yeah, I think this artwork really taught me that if you keep trying at something, even if you just have to keep changing it and it's a lot of effort and it takes much longer than it usually would, that there'll always be a good result, whether that's actually being happy with the artwork or learning a lot of new things, which I definitely did. Because I think part of the reason this artwork was so hard for me was because I don't think I'm that great at drawing animals, and I don't have much experience drawing animals, which is probably why I'm not great drawing animals. And so trying to figure out how to draw a tabaxi was really tough, but I think I managed okay. Mostly just things like figuring out where to add the ears on the head. I never thought that would be such a big problem, but it really does mess with the head shape, and I did try a lot of different positions before I realized where they should be positioned on the head. So you can now see that I'm shading the armor, and I've just done the flat colors for everything. And yeah, I had a bit of trouble with the armor just because I wasn't sure how realistic to draw it. I do have a base as an artist who draws very realistic things. That's what I just learned to draw, and that's what I was drawing for a lot of my childhood. And I really wanted to develop a sort of cartoony or animated style, but I basically had to start at the beginning because I had no idea how to translate a realistic drawing into that. So I had to create my style from scratch, and I still have issues with certain things figuring out how it would look as an animated style, because I'm just so used to it being like more realistic, and I think that shows with this armor. It is a bit more realistic than you would probably use for this kind of style, but I think it kind of works still. And what I ended up doing was the armor layer, I just decreased the opacity a little bit, and it's not as contrasting to the rest of the artwork anymore. So I think it still works. And yeah, I don't mind it actually. And the program that I'm using to draw in this is Medibang Paint. I do really like it. I have tried other programs like Krita and Photoshop, but they're just a little too complicated for me, and art is only a hobby for me. So I just didn't want to put in the time and effort into learning those other programs. One program that I do eventually want to try though is Procreate, just because I feel like so many people are using it, that there's so many like tips and tricks out there that would really help out with your art. And now I'm just rendering the skin, or the fur I should say, and I did look at a lot of references before I started this artwork, because I knew that drawing a Tabaxi would be a different challenge for me, and figuring out how to incorporate the anatomy of a Tabaxi and everything. So I looked at a lot of other artists' artworks of Tabaxis and how they incorporated it, and I thought I would have to do a lot of work to make their skin look like fur. But what I noticed is that a lot of artists don't actually do like that much detail. It's just kind of implied that it's fur, especially with like if the line art kind of has the shape of fur and things like that. So I ended up not really having to worry about it that much, and that was the aspect of this artwork that I was really worried about before I got into it. So yeah, very grateful for that, because I'm okay with shading skin. I've done that a lot before. Yeah, it was really good, and would definitely recommend using references because they are very, very helpful. I don't know how people draw without references. I think when I was younger, I used to be like so disappointed that I couldn't, or like that when I did draw without a reference, it didn't look as good. And I kind of thought it was like, when you can draw without a reference, you're like the best artist ever. And like, yes, that's like, I know that really, really, really good artists can not use references and still make it look really good. And I do want to reach that point someday. But I think there's nothing wrong with using references and making sure that your artwork is anatomically correct, or, looks the best that it could be. And yeah, I think my artwork has improved so much since I started using references. And with Zamari, since they are quite androgynous, I managed to find this reference that was like the same pose with a girl and a boy. And I tried to incorporate aspects of both of those references, but yeah, I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I think Zamari ended up still looking quite masculine, which I was a bit disappointed with. I wanted Zamari to really look androgynous, but yeah, I don't know what happened. I'm still learning. And that's actually part of why I started my channel, because I really have no idea what I'm doing, like why I'm starting this channel. But I thought that a lot of people would probably relate to my process of trying to find out what works for me art style wise. So here you go. And here is my final artwork. Thank you so much for watching. If you're still watching up to this point, I'm really grateful, and I'm really excited about starting this channel. So see you in the next one.